Welcome to the Hitless Wonder blog video podcast, episode 2.
The Wrath of Cons.
Yes, the
Conventions. That's the only thing I can come up with right now.
Yeah, exactly. So
short notice.
With Dan Day, I am Paul Leisen, and we're here for the second installment, and glad to...
By such popular demand, there had to be a second one. So
yes.
I think 5 or 6 people listened to it. So.
I think so. I think 7 people listened, but one person listened 52 times. So thank you to the 7 people that decided they wanted to hear our voices again, or not. So, but again, I mean, we're back. We want to talk to you about filmmaking and films, and we've got a few subjects that we want to talk about tonight, and maybe some stuff that will...
And as probably we did in the first one, we'll probably be going off the rails here on all sorts of divergent locations, so you'll just have to bear with us, and you might learn something you've never learned before, or didn't want to learn in the first place.
Exactly. So we're going to educate you, badly educate you, and if you're in the back of the classroom, start falling asleep now. So... there will not be a quiz at the end of this, because I don't like filling out Scantrons. So, but anyway, so we've got a few things on the docket tonight to talk about. Some of the things that I'm going to kind of run through our list here real quick, and if we get to them, great. If I'm hoping we can get to everything, but one of the first topics at hand is the Leonardo DiCaprio talk, and how amazing!
Thank God he won an Oscar! Oh my God! We're all saved.
He was so much better this year than he has been every year that he's in the film, being Leonardo DiCaprio. So,
did you see The Revenant?
I have not yet.
I haven't either.
I do want to see
it.
So
we might as well admit that we actually haven't seen it.
No, we haven't, and I'm going to, jump out on the limb here and say that it was probably Leonardo DiCaprio's best performance ever. So, but yeah, I definitely want to see it and find out what the hype is about. Find out if he necessarily is worthy, and we're going to be talking about the Academy Awards in general, and talk about the process of what Best Picture is, and is a year or less really enough time to determine Best Picture of the year. So Dan and I are going to go through a couple processes here of, should the Academy Awards be more like a sports process of Hall of Fame? And we'll get to talking about that. We're gonna. Go ahead. Sorry.
Before we do that, I would like to point out one thing. Paul sent me a very interesting Facebook message about DiCaprio winning the Academy Award, which saved Western civilization as we know it.
Yes.
And his point was that DiCaprio basically did his typical DiCaprio role of the angry, intense guy who goes through various suffering, and Paul's point was, is that really the best acting role? He's basically doing the same thing he's been doing for a long, long time, and that was a very good point. Mm-hmm. And it basically makes you think about what great film acting is, and there's several different definitions of that, because DiCaprio he's a major movie star. If there is a definition of a major movie star these days, he is one. And do you reward him for basically continuing his typical persona, or do you reward him for great acting beyond that persona? And then once again, that goes back to, is just being a movie star, is that great acting in and of itself?
Mm. Yeah, my colleague Jason Holes, he showed me an article earlier in the week about the formula of how certain actors go through winning the Best Actor category, and there's a certain kind of thing that actors have to go through that the Academy recognizes.
The character, are you talking about career or as the character in the movie?
As a character in the film, and then
some type of suffering or debilitative injury or mental or physical disability or.
And the age of the actor himself, and
So it's almost like sabermetrics for Oscars, I guess
exactly,
you could call it. Okay.
exactly. And I'll have to dig out the article and maybe try to post it within some of the notes when we post this video. And it was just a really interesting thing of kind of going through people who've kind of won it in the past, and just the process of that voting and how it kind of like it almost applies for many of the actors that have won the award over the years, and it was really interesting to kind of sit back and take a look at that.
I read an article on the internet from the Flickering Myth website, and the guy was basically talking about how the Oscars are not all that important. He was ragging on the Oscars, but his whole point was, well, DiCaprio won because it was quote unquote his turn to win, and he went through kind of like the same thing in that article about how like when Martin Scorsese won for The Departed, even though I could name 5 much better movies Scorsese directed than The Departed, but he won for The Departed, and everybody kind of, oh, well, it was his turn. And once again, if the whole point, what is the point of the Oscars? Is it to give an Oscar for the best performance or the best direction or the best whatever for that particular year? Or is it, well, we're just going to give it to whoever we feel deserves to win it at this time? Then it's like Paul said, you might as well just have a Hall of Fame then, than not even worry about individual accolades, because that's,
Yeah, I'm kind of fine with the individual accolades. I mean, if that's what they kind of want to do, and it kind of like satisfies their.
Well, it also plays a role in promoting these movies. I mean, when the Oscars, the reason the Oscars came into being was money. I mean, it all goes back to money, basically. That way you can put on your poster nominated for so many awards, blah blah blah, and then the average person who doesn't really know movies all that well, or just will rent anything, anything new on Redbox or Netflix or whatever it is they do nowadays. Like, oh, 6 Academy, this has got to be good. I got to rent this.
And I also think too, it's and there might be a few people that listen to this podcast and find it that maybe Dan and I are being a little bit unfair to Leo as far as.
We love you, Leo.
We do. I do love
You're
you,
so
Leo.
cute.
But my point is that you bored. You guys never saw The Revenant, so how can you sit back and judge the performance? You know what? There are people voting for Best Picture out there that don't watch the films.
Do not watch these movies.
So,
obviously, yes.
And I'm not being critical of Leonardo DiCaprio in that context.
He's obviously an accomplished actor. I mean, he wouldn't be in the position where he is if he didn't have any talent. I've seen most of his films. He is a very good actor. I don't think he's very likable to me as an actor, and he doesn't play very many likable roles, actually, when you think about it. He's kind of a strange leading man, and because most of his characters are basically jerks, or they have something wrong with them. I mean, and I guess you could give him credit for not going, after Titanic. He could have gone down that route, the cute leading guy, and instead, I mean, you do have to give him credit for taking on roles that very few actors would want to take on, because these are very unlikable characters. Howard Hughes, J. Edgar Hoover, the Wizard of Wall Street, or whatever it was,
and Gilbert Grape's brother.
Exactly, yeah.
Which I think was a really good role for him, and I think that he honestly deserved a nod that year. Monsieur Candy and Django. Yes. Yeah. I also liked him in what was it, The Beach.
I've never seen that.
That was actually.
I think was there a beach in The Beach?
There was a beach.
Oh, okay. Well, I mean, there you go.
But I thought that was kind of an underrated Leonardo DiCaprio film here. So
But no, I think it's nothing personal against DiCaprio. It's just and I think I said this in the first podcast. This whole groundswell on the end. Oh, he's got to win this year. He needs to win. He's owed it. Like the entire world's going to fall off its axis if he doesn't win the Best Actor Oscar. And to me, it's just I don't get that, because his legacy is going to be his legacy whether he wins an award or not. I don't think that cements his legacy, or that proves that he's a great actor because he happened to win a Best Actor Oscar.
And do you think that, since we're talking about kind of like the Hall of Fame as far as films are concerned, as kind of a whole, do you think that that should be also considering like actors in their body of work? Meaning that, okay, so
Oh yes, definitely.
we talk about sports, people in sports that are currently playing, and I'll give kind of like a Blackhawks reference to like Jonathan Toews that plays for the Blackhawks. There are many people who would say that basically if he would retire soon, he would almost be kind of a lock for the Hall of Fame. Would that be the same thing for Leonardo DiCaprio? Like, let's say if he walked away from acting right now, and I think we should look at that instead of with the Academy Awards. Should there be Hall of Fames?
Well, now that I think about it, because an actor's career goes on far longer than an athlete's career.
Mm-hmm.
Many actors in their younger days had totally different careers than he did in their older. Leslie Nielsen. This
Yes.
just comes to mind. Leslie Nielsen in the 50s and the 60s was a typical regular Hollywood leading man. And of course, most people know him now as the goofy guy in all the the Zucker brothers movies. I mean, it's almost like he had two totally different careers. It's like he's two totally different actors. So you could say, well, yeah, Leonardo DiCaprio deserves to be in like the Actors Hall of Fame, but maybe his best work is yet to come. Maybe when he gets older and he'll have parts and roles that are even better than what he's playing right now.
Yeah, that is a good point.
There's a lot of actors who, when they become character actors or non-leading men, they actually get better roles and have better performances. So, yeah, because, I mean, one of my heroes, the great Sir Christopher Lee, he was acting in his 90s. I mean, he literally acted in, like, I think 6 or 7 different decades. So it's a lot harder to judge a performer's career, I think, than an athlete's career, because an athlete has a very finite, time where they're actually being an athlete, whereas a performer can, Mickey Rooney, I mean, he started acting when he was like 8, and he was like 98, and he had like film credits. So
yeah, that's true. That's a good point.
That just totally brings something. I just thought of that, and it just, that's something is, when you talk about career for a performer, you can almost say a performer's career never ends. I mean, you've got, I just saw a commercial on, a couple hours ago where, they CGI'd Marilyn Monroe in it. So, I mean,
Yeah, that was an interesting commercial. It almost creeped me out.
Yeah,
in a certain
it's
kind of way.
it's a disturbing commercial, but that's how you get, clickbait nowadays is you get people's attention is by being just. I don't want to see Willem Dafoe in a skirt. And I realize some people might think that's politically incorrect. Sorry, I'm just being honest. Okay.
Are you sure he might look, pretty decent in the skirt? But I didn't watch pretty much any of the Super Bowl, and I heard about the commercials afterwards. And
yeah,
so.
unfortunately, if you I watch a lot of sports, so you wind up seeing all these commercials whether you like to see them or not.
Yeah, eventually they make the rotation to the point where I get to see them too. So, yeah, I mean, that's some of what we're talking about as far as the Hall of Fame is concerned. I think we're going to keep touching upon everything here, too. And because, again, I mean, as you were saying, like people who've changed the roles. I mean, George Kennedy, who unfortunately, tragically passed away recently.
George Kennedy was like the consummate character actor. And, when I was a kid, I kind of knew who he was because he was in everything. And one thing I'll say about George Kennedy, I never ever thought that he was miscast in anything. He always fit whatever role he was playing. And he played, I mean, he was in television, I mean, movies. I mean, he just did everything. And once again, we're talking about film acting. You can make the case that being a character actor is actually harder than being a leading man or a leading lady. Because a character actor, you literally have to play all sorts of roles, and you can't really. I mean, every actor performer, and when I say actor, I mean actress as well. I know some people don't like the term actress; it's politically incorrect, but every performer brings something of themselves to a performance. I don't care how much makeup they use or they try to disguise themselves. They still bring something of their own performance. With a character actor, that's kind of hard. With a leading actor or a leading lady. I mean, most movie stars kind of play themselves in a way. I mean, John Wayne had his stock John Wayne character. Cary Grant for most of his movies, he was Cary Grant. Katharine Hepburn was always Katharine Hepburn. No matter, she could play Wilma Flintstone, and she's going to be Katharine Hepburn. So that's just, and that, I'm not taking, that's what movie stars do. That's the whole part of being a movie star. You have that persona. If it's successful, you use that persona over and over again. Somebody like George Kennedy, he can do that in a way, but he can't really do that because he has to, he's got so many other roles he has to play. He can't just, and he has to make himself fit for each role, and he was excellent at doing that.
Yeah, I mean, I remember him when he was in the Naked Gun series too, and just how, he went from, what was it, like Airport.
Yeah, and those airport movies, and my buddy Josh Kennedy loves them. He actually did a, not so much a spoof, but kind of an homage to them. But no, the airport movies, those disaster movies in the 70s, had as much impact on popular culture as the superhero movies do today.
Oh yeah.
And the airport movies were, now people look at them and it's kind of a joke. But I mean, back then those were huge hits back in the day.
Mm-hmm. So,
and Cool Hand Luke, which I think happens to be the best Paul Newman movie of all time. Yes, even better than Butch Cassidy and the Sundance Kid. You can quote me on that.
Yeah, my wife would probably agree with you on Cool Hand Luke. She's a huge Paul Newman fan.
Oh yeah, I mean most females are.
The only similarity between Paul Newman and I are we share the same first name. So I'm lucky enough to hold that, and that's about it. So, but the other things that we're going to be touching upon are best sports films. And Dan is probably going to fill up a good portion of this as far as what we're going to be talking there. We're going to talk about remakes for a little bit. I think Dan and I are going to start casting some remakes that we think shouldn't happen, but we're, neither Dan or I are very big fans of remaking films because, and we'll get into that here in a little bit too, but just as the train passes behind us, but just because the fact that, I think you and I both agree that originality in Hollywood hasn't existed, I think, in...
Yeah, and, I'm always getting nailed by friends of mine, non-movie buff friends. I think I called them civilians in the first podcast. That's how I kind of refer to them. Mm-hmm. That's my my smart-ass comment of the day. And people are always telling me, why are you always ragging on remakes, Dan? You need to give them a chance. And everybody, Shakespeare gets remade and Jane Austen. Well, there's a difference between Shakespeare and Jane Austen and... these classic works of literature, having different versions of those, I can understand that. It's like Broadway musicals. I can understand it as well because it's basically a set format. There are certain things you can do to make it different, but for the most part, if you're doing a revival of, say, Seven Brides for Seven Brothers, you kind of know what it's going to be. When you're remaking movies like they just announced they're going to do another remake of the Thomas Crown Affair, which was remade in the 1990s with Pierce Brosnan, which I doubt anybody even remembers. Why would you need to remake that a third time? And my problem is, and Paul and I were discussing this earlier, there are so many great books, especially in the science fiction and horror realm, that have never ever been properly adapted from people like Isaac Asimov, Ray Bradbury, Arthur C. Clarke, H.P. Lovecraft. I think there's even some Stephen King books that haven't been filmed, and why, and I understand why Hollywood does this. They want to make money. It's all about making money. And if you put something out there that, has some semblance to the audience, or the audience knows something about it, then, the audience might say, whoa, Thomas Crown Affair, I remember that movie when I was a kid. I'll go see the new version. Instead of coming out with something totally different like the Joe Blow Affair. Well, I don't know what Joe Blow is. I ain't gonna watch this. So,
yeah, I don't know if remaking the Thomas Crown Affair is a very good idea. But I mean, then again, maybe I would rather see somebody besides Rene Russo in a film. I don't know, but
Well, it was Faye Dunaway in the original.
Yes,
and Steve McQueen, and nobody's cooler than Steve McQueen. So once again, why? I mean, yeah, Pierce Brosnan, okay, but I mean, once again, it goes back to if you have Steve McQueen at the height of his powers, why remake a movie like that? And
yeah. I mean, there are plenty of films that are on my list of remakes and to bang your head against the wall and just scream why and but again, I mean, there have been classic films like Psycho that have been remade.
yeah, where I refused to watch it, but apparently what I think it was Gus Van Sant. Apparently, what he did, he literally had the film playing on the set, and he literally recreated every single shot. And to me, it's like, what exactly is the point of that? That a kid with a camcorder could do that if he had enough time and enough energy to do it. I don't. And here's the thing. I've never actually read the novel Psycho, but from my reading of Hitchcock, and I do have a book on the making of Psycho. From my reading of Hitchcock, apparently Robert Bloch's, I hope I'm pronouncing his name correctly, I'm probably not. Robert Bloch's novel has a lot of differences from the movie. So if you are going to remake Psycho, why not remake it just the way it was in the novel? That would make I probably wouldn't go see it, but that would make sense to me. But if you're going to remake Psycho and you basically recreate it shot by shot, and all you do is cast different actors, and you put it in color, that's like going to an art museum and just copying a famous painting, and I don't. Why would you take the time and trouble to do that? I just don't get it.
Because it's in color.
Yeah, I know.
It's in color
because kids don't like black and white. But what I found is actually younger people are more their minds think creatively enough they will accept black and white, where it's the older people that don't like black and white. Like, that's one of the things my dad always goes, all you do is watch black and white movies.
And maybe it was different to, when sound first gotten, introduced into film, where there was actual spoken dialogue that you could hear. Maybe some people, because again, I mean, throughout film history, a lot of people have said that sound basically
killed the movie.
Mm-hmm.
Alfred Hitchcock, said that in the Hitchcock Truffaut documentary, which I watched at Notre Dame a couple weeks ago, and I actually got the book today, the revised edition of it. I mean, all the great film directors started out in the silent era: John Ford, Hitchcock, Howard Hawks, Frank Capra. I know I'm forgetting somebody.
Well, we'll be seeing a silent film tomorrow night.
Yes, in Indianapolis. The capital of the great state of Indiana.
Yes, we will be heading to the Indianapolis Museum of Art to go screen Speedy.
From Harold Lloyd, the great Harold Lloyd. And I've seen, of course, I own it on DVD. Doesn't everybody? I mean, you go down to Walmart and you pick up, the Harold Lloyd box set. But no, Speedy is one of his, I mean, it's one of his best films. It's not as well known because, when people think of Harold Lloyd, people see the image of him hanging off the clock, off the skyscraper, and his career was far more diverse than that. I mean, he was a great silent comedian, and of course it was all visual back then. And actually, from what I understand, from one of my reading of silent film history, out of the three great silent film comedians, Harold Lloyd, Buster Keaton, and Charlie Chaplin, it was Lloyd that actually, his movies made the most money. He was most popular among American film goers. And I don't think he's as well known as Chaplin or Keaton, because Chaplin or Keaton, the intellectuals love both of them. Mm-hmm. And they're both great. I mean, I'm a Buster Keaton man all the way. I just absolutely love Buster Keaton, and I've spent a great deal of money buying his remastered stuff on Kino. I should own Kino, basically. I probably do, and I don't even realize it. But
yeah, they probably have a special Dan Day
they should
area.
Good Lord.
Where they're probably
look what came in the mail today too. Kino Lorber, Black Sabbath on Blu-ray. So anyway, I got it for $10. So anyway, but
Kino, no, Dan cannot quit you.
Yeah,
so.
I could smoke crack. I could be addicted to various sexual techniques, but no, I buy Blu-rays and DVDs. So I guess in the end, it's not that bad.
Well, I don't know about the whole addiction to various section. I mean, that actually might be a pretty nice addiction there. So I don't know.
Well, I'm an
but,
Indiana guy.
Oh,
So,
okay.
you know.
So, but no Tom Petty there, and you don't like the Indiana girls. Okay, no. All right. I figured I'd try
On
to
those
throw
Indiana nights.
that. Yes, exactly. So.
Tom Petty.
So, but other things that basically we're going to be talking about are basically the Hall of Fame, and should the Academy Awards, or should just an organization start a film Hall of Fame? And Dan and I kind of talked about it a little bit in like what would the criteria be, or the time that would have to pass to basically have these films become eligible for a Hall of Fame. Should it be 20 years, 10 years, 5
Now,
years?
with the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame, isn't it 25 years after the release of a band or a performer's first album? Is it 25 or 30?
I believe it's 20 or 25
So,
years.
would you say an actor or a performer or a director, it would be 25 years after their film debut? Would that be about the right time? Because then again, you might be shortchanging a lot of people, because there are some people who became stars literally doing nothing but like bit roles for the first 20. Wasn't like Ben Kingsley, like he...
Oh gosh, I mean, you got people like Morgan Freeman.
Yeah.
I mean, but I mean, do you recognize again television? Do you I mean,
Yeah, because there's a lot of people who have this kind of, film and television are two totally different things. But what you're getting at with TV now is like TV is totally different than when I was a kid or when Paul was a kid. I mean, you've got, everything is in widescreen. A lot of these TV shows are basically streaming now. They have no limitations on them. They're basically R-rated. So, I mean, 21st century television, you really can't compare it to the television of,
well,
the
shows,
television that I was growing up in.
and the shows too. I mean, if you have cop drama in the 70s, every episode was a different kind of crime happening.
Yeah,
and
yeah.
Now,
It's
an arc from episode 1 to episode 10.
It's their way of getting the viewer to go back to the same show. Well, I can't, you back in the old days, say you missed Dukes of Hazzard. I'm just pulling this like way out of the air. Well, you're not going to worry about, did Daisy break her leg wrecking her Jeep, or did Boss Hogg have a heart attack? No, you knew in the next episode of these American television shows that basically you're going to have the same setup. None
of us wanted Daisy breaking her legs.
No.
Trust me,
No.
none of us did.
The old joke about television shows in the 70s and the 80s, if the main character fell in love, that poor woman was going to be dead by the end of the episode, and the next episode she'd be totally forgotten about. It's like, Ponch falls in love on Chips. Well, she's dead meat. She's going to get run over by a truck or a train, or Ponch is going to find out she's like the biggest drug dealer in the San Fernando Valley, and the next episode, this would, even as a kid, I kind of noticed this. The next episode, she would be totally forgotten about, even though she was the love of Ponch's life. By the next episode, she didn't exist anymore. But back then, that was the way it was, and now, of course, you couldn't get away with that because of the internet. People obsess over these TV shows like The Walking Dead, Doctor Who, Game of Thrones, and I have a theory. I've talked this about with my brother Robert, that I think a lot of people watch these shows not so much for the quality of the show. They watch these shows because they want to talk about them on the internet, and they see their friends talking about them on the internet, and they feel left out. And you don't want to be the one kid on the playground that's all by himself. You want to get into I'm not disparaging these shows. I'm sure that a lot of people watch them for the shows, but I'm convinced that a lot of these, The Walking Dead and these shows, people get into them so much because they want to get on the internet. They want to get involved. They want to get involved in the social media aspect of it.
I have to agree, because for a show like The Walking Dead, you have a show directly after it that's a live television show called The Talking Dead. I mean, so that people can immediately start talking about these shows. And again, I mean, there's a whole new form of social media etiquette out there about how not to spoil episodes of these television shows, and again, I've seen people chastised, and I mean, there were certain shows out there about, don't ruin this episode of such and such because you're basically the new ass of the internet if you decide that you want to sit back
and then when you're dealing with something like Doctor Who, which can come on in a different country, in a different time zone, then you've got the whole internet thing going on there as well. But you also, it's not so much it affects the fans of the show, the internet, it affects the people who make these shows. Because, in the 70s, the 80s, you could make a goofy episode or a lousy episode and get away with it. Nowadays, if something going on that the fans don't like in the first 5 minutes of a show, they're going to go on Twitter and Facebook and they're just going to go crazy over it. So it's kind of funny how the producers of these TV shows, they have to deal with a totally different audience than just some critic who works for Variety. They have to deal with
you have to deal with us.
Yeah, 5 million followers on the internet. And,
you have to deal with the two guys making a blog.
But no,
here.
to go back to your original point, I think you can't look at, when it comes to an actor's career, you can't look at television the way you would say in the 70s or the 80s or even the 90s. I mean,
No.
television is almost like a not so much a film, but maybe a.
It's been reinvented. I mean, it really has been, as far as...
You almost have to come up with a different phrasing than just a TV show. It has to be something in between a TV show and a theatrical film. I don't know what you would...
Yeah,
maybe I have, like my Facebook friend Will McKinley, the media maven himself, maybe he has his own kind of a definition of it, but...
That'd be interesting to get his point and get some other people's perspectives on what exactly starts a career. Because again, even when you talk about, we kind of use the example of Rock and Roll Hall of Fame, when bands were making independent releases, or let's say they were actually in another band before they got into, band X, but before band X was band W, but they've been in the business, but band X is what made them. And so, I mean, again, is it just, do we specifically look at, and again, the rules could be across the board here. We do we only look at what is cinematic releases, or because then again, are we talking about actual distribution, or are we talking about people who had a whole video career back in the 80s and 90s, direct-to-video
and now you have, this, you've made films, you've tried to get them out there. You have films now that do not get released theatrically, but are still viable product.
I think there are people out there that are much, of course they are way more successful than I am, that are getting direct-to-video releases, because right now the culture of Hollywood is make the $250 million film. And so, and I don't know if we really touched upon this in our last episode, but I mean, the death of the mid-budget film. The $10 to $15 million films that were really populating the really decade of the 1990s.
When we were in the late 80s, early 90s, these films were getting into theaters. Now they don't even... South Bend, and Paul will definitely agree with me on this, South Bend is very bad when it comes to getting... I mean, there are several films nominated for Oscars, and I'm not saying that, if you're nominated for an Oscar, you should automatically get, play in a certain amount of theaters, but there are plenty of famous acclaimed films that never play in the South Bend area. And South Bend, it's not like it has the University of Notre Dame, so I mean it's a major college town. It's about 100,000 people, and there's plenty of movies where I have to wait until it comes on Xfinity, or I have to literally buy the Blu-ray because it just doesn't play around here.
Yeah, that's pretty much correct. I mean, because I remember when I lived here, if certain films got nominated for Oscars, you would get a short release. I think on the south side of South Bend, I think Showplace 16 would at least get some films like that would be, and you'd have to be quick about seeing them because they would be in and out in a matter of basically days. So it would be very, very tough. But I mean, the mid-budget film, the $10 to $15 million film. I mean, and again, I think Netflix is also doing that. I think they're creating these films for on-demand purposes. So I mean, because a
Yeah.
lot of people are watching stuff at home, but again, to see any of these films on the bigger screen, I think is just something that
Yes, I mean, I
is.
always, I mean, there are certain films that I mean, okay, if this is the only way I can see it is at home, because when you get it through Xfinity, it is in HD. You've got the 5.1 sound, so that, but still, you should try to see a film in a theater with an audience.
Yes.
Sometimes the audience can be a pain in the ass, and unfortunately that is a problem. But I just think seeing a film on the big screen, there's nothing like it really, especially a great film, and especially if you have an audience that is into the film. And unfortunately, things being what they are, that's not always the case. Let me ask you this question about mid-level films. Do you think
Okay.
that audiences now, because of all these super duper blockbusters, that they are spoiled and that they will not go for mid-level films because they expect so much now from a theatrical release?
Yeah, I mean, they may be accustomed to the fact of explosions and
Yeah.
CG and Scarlett Johansson in tight pants.
But I
Which,
mean, you and I, we saw films in the '80s and '90s that were superhero type, genre type films that didn't cost $200 million, but were still effective. I mean, look at Darkman. I mean,
yeah.
Darkman, I think, is far more entertaining than 90% of these superhero films that are being made. And if you know anything about Sam Raimi, he really didn't have any type of budget whatsoever. But that film's still, like I said, that film is far more entertaining than
Oh
something.
yeah, I think Darkman is great. I think that you would have an audience of those people out there willing enough to see it. I don't think Hollywood wants to gamble on that,
Yeah,
and
I know,
and I
because they're scared to death of, they'd rather, how am I trying to say this? They would rather not lose money instead of having a bigger chance to make more money. And,
yeah,
and the sad thing is, if a young George Lucas came around today and peddled Star Wars, it would never get made.
I
And
don't think so.
that's what's really sad about the whole thing. Somebody out there has the new Star Wars, but it's probably not going to get made. They'll probably tell him, well, just remake Event Horizon or just remake Darkman. I mean, I have a bad feeling that's probably going to be coming down the pike here pretty
Well,
soon.
it's interesting that you say that too, because again, I really do think that it stunts the growth of more creative talent that can come out and do things. Because what we're seeing also are people using outlets like Kickstarter and
Yeah.
Indiegogo and to basically go fund their productions, or you'll see people who are special effects artists that want to get a film out there, like let's say the film Monsters that came out a few years ago, and it's on Netflix, or even what happened even a couple of years ago with the remake of The Thing, and they hired a bunch of practical effects artists to do all of the creature effects for the remake of The Thing, and the studio changed over and did all CG. So all the people that did the practical effects moved their effects and created a new film called, I believe it's Harbinger Down.
I didn't
And
even know about this.
and it's kind of one of the newer horror sci-fi films out there, and that was something I want to talk about too, is the lack of horror sci-fi that's out there that is new rather than another alien film
Well,
or something like that. But
like I told you, I do have a theory about that.
okay,
I think the major studios look at science fiction as a PG kind of thing, as kind of a mainstream audience type of thing. And I don't think they like mixing science fiction and horror, because then they're afraid of getting that the R rating, and then you can't sell the Happy Meals and the toys. That's just how I kind of feel about that.
but that theory has kind of now been blown out of the water with the success of the Deadpool movie, don't you think?
Yeah, you could make a. I mean, I haven't seen Deadpool, but you know, I just wonder, is Deadpool, is it like a one time? I mean, is it just because I know Hollywood is going to try to recreate that, and it's probably going to like whatever they do. Now people are saying, oh, Batman versus Superman is going to be an R, and
I don't
and
think
this,
so.
this
I think
movie's
that
going to be an R, and
you're gonna probably see some more films out there. I mean, if you're gonna create Punisher films, or
yeah.
I
Well,
mean,
once again, going back to the '80s and '90s, I mean, we went and saw R, action movies and genre movies that were really R rated. I mean, hard R movies.
Yes.
And then look at Total Recall. I mean, if you tried to get a major, I mean, they did remake it. I have no idea what that movie was like. But I mean, if you tried to remake Total Recall the way Verhoeven made it, I mean, most of the major studios, oh, you can't. No, that's too nasty. No, you got to tone it down. So
yeah, you're really never going to get another Verhoeven out there to get what he was getting out of some of his films. And
yeah, it's kind of funny now. In the late '80s, early '90s, the type of mainstream films that would be now considered just. You have people, protesting them. The stuff that went on in some of these. I'm talking like
RoboCop,
mm-hmm.
and the fact that we actually got a lesser R version of RoboCop, and then I actually saw the uncut version about 10 years ago, and I was like, whoa, this is no wonder why this didn't make it.
I mean, isn't that like the old urban legend about how you put in extra stuff in the first cut, so when you take it to the MPAA, you that gives you wiggle room. Well, I'll just cut that out so you can get your R rating or whatever. I mean, I've heard that in a lot of people. I heard Mel Gibson did that for Braveheart. Like for Braveheart, he there's battle scenes that he did are like 10 times worse than the battle scenes that are in the movie, and he did that so when people complained, well, I'll just cut this out. So, then they see it again. Oh, well, it doesn't look as bad, even though it was probably, that was his intention anyways.
Which is odd to me, too, because then you're spending that extra money creating these scenes that are never going to be seen unless you have a director's cut of a film. Yeah. And, again, like, you have to create more or less a scene that is going to be chopped because of the fact that
that's a good point. I never
have
really
these
thought about it that way.
In the MPAA. That, and there's no rhyme or reason to anything that they judge. I mean, there are films
money,
out there.
I think money has a lot to do with it.
Oh yeah, I mean, I think that if Spielberg is going to get an easier PG-13, then
my favorite is the the warning label that comes on at the beginning of the Blu-ray, sci-fi violence. Well, what exactly is sci-fi violence? I mean,
that's true.
When Dirty Harry, shoots 15 guys in 2 seconds. Isn't that kind of science fiction when you think about? I mean, anything could be sci-fi violence.
Well, now I think they would consider it. They would probably put in a little extra joke, especially if Gran Torino was re-rated, that they would probably call it right-wing violence. And then it's
for political incorrectness. I'm waiting for that to show up on a this movie is rated R for political incorrectness, and I'm surprised somebody hasn't gone down you see the ones now smoking.
If the
they
Zucker,
literally put smoking in the warning.
If the Zucker brothers did another airplane movie, then there would probably be a PC R-rated version of. But yeah, I mean, I have seen smoking, again,
I've seen smoking. What's the other one?
But there was talk back a few years ago that if anybody was on camera smoking in a film, that film would be rated R. I mean, is it as bad as dropping an F-bomb in a film? Because you're allowed one in a PG-13 rated film.
I can't name any title offhand, but I'm pretty sure I've seen PG movies where somebody's smoking. I mean, of course, it may have been back in the 70s and 80s. Look at the 30s and 40s where literally, these people were just like, they were just puffing like.
Well, people were smoking like crazy. Your protagonist would smoke like crazy.
Yeah, and it was considered, in every Hollywood star, and their money shot, publicity shot would be, appearing with I'm surprised that all of them weren't dead by the time they were 50 years old.
PG movies had nudity in it as well too, but now I mean, smoking is going to get you the R rated, the R rating, and then smoking weed is going to get you, the Disney film, the general audiences here. So it's weird how certain. I mean, I'm not pro or against anything here. This isn't anything, but it's just weird how certain things get passes and certain things don't. So I don't want to.
But anyway, to get back to the original topic, I think you were trying.
We are. What are we talking about?
I think you were trying to make the point that. There should be a certain amount of time before we judge a film.
Yes,
and that's a very good point. You and I were talking earlier about The Big Lebowski. Mm-hmm. The Big Lebowski, literally every day on Twitter or Facebook or Yahoo or whatever, I will see some sort of reference to that film. And when that film came out, I don't believe. I mean, you're the Coen Brothers guy. I mean,
yes.
you love the Coen Brothers.
I do.
I don't think it was really that popular, but it just over the years it is just it has made an impact on popular culture. I guess what I'm trying to say is that the impact that a film makes on popular culture, I think, is far more important than how much money it makes or how many more awards it wins.
I think you're right. I think that's a very good example of a kind of a comedy film, because the Coens were very good at making neo-noir type films. Another film might be, let's say, Blade Runner, which was completely a financial mess.
The Blues Brothers, when it came
Yes.
out, didn't make a lot of money. It
No.
was considered, an absolute bomb, and
It was overlong.
and John Landis literally almost destroyed half of Chicago doing it, and he got a lot of flack for that from. And I mean, now the Blues Brothers is one of my 10 favorite movies of all time. I mean, that is a movie where if you quote that movie, especially in the Midwest, I don't know how it is to people out on the West Coast or the East Coast or in the southern part of America, but I definitely in the Midwest, the Blues Brothers is a huge part of Midwestern popular culture.
If a place is serving orange whips, you can only order 3 of them,
Yes.
and if there's a table of 4, somebody's not getting an orange whip. So that's just a general rule of thumb out here. But yeah, I think that's something to. I mean, there are plenty of films out there that gain steam as time goes on. I mean,
Heat.
oh yes, and let's talk about the 20-year rule here. So we would basically talk about films that were made in 1995. Heat would be one of them. And the films that were nominated for Best Picture in 1995, and I'll give you a breakdown here, were Braveheart, which won for Best Picture that year, Apollo 13, Babe, The Postman, and Sense and Sensibility. So, and Il Postino, the Postman.
Okay,
I'm not talking about the
no,
we're not talking about the Kevin Costner.
Obviously, you can't see us, but I literally sat up on my seat when he said the I'm like, "Whoa."
Yeah, I should have been a little bit more clear when I said The Postman. Because no, Kevin Costner films, I don't think.
Well, he won with Dances with Wolves.
No, I'm not even going to go there with Dances with Wolves because that to me is an excuse for a bad film winning.
I like Dances with Wolves.
I would like Dances with Wolves
and
if
I have
the main
John
character.
Barry soundtrack.
No, the soundtrack's great, but I just.
But I know I can understand. It's one of those movies where the more you watch it, you start seeing. I mean, it's basically a 1990 movie set in 1890, and we don't want to. We go on about Dances.
It's a very whitewashed film,
Yes.
and John Oliver kind of went over that with kind of a segment that he did a couple weeks ago about whitewashing of cinema and about to show struggles of a certain people that you need
It's
a
the White Messiah movie.
Exactly.
And Joey DeAngelis, who does a fantastic job with his silent film and Blockbuster Sunday, he has his own little podcast. So I'm kind of like, we kind of stole his idea in a way. Very good Facebook friend of mine, a very young man, but extremely intelligent when it comes to cinema. Joey DeAngelis mentioned the White Messiah film. And I mean, there are just so many movies. Dances with Wolves is definitely a White Messiah movie.
Oh,
and
yeah,
I remember he posted something about it, or he made a list about it, and he named all these movies, and I didn't even think of them as White Messiah movies. And I thought, wow, that's exactly what this movie is. And you still see it all the time.
Yeah.
Wasn't there
Tom Cruise in The Last Samurai?
47 Ronin with Keanu Reeves?
Yeah.
And I'm like, wait a second, that's like one of the greatest Japanese folktales of all time, but yet Keanu Reeves. And I'm not exactly Mr. Politically Correct. I mean, I don't want to get into politics either because we'll just piss everybody off. But it's like I'm like, wait a second, no, you just basically like crapped on the people of Japan. It's like
Yeah, I don't understand what people are so afraid of. And again, it comes down to money. It really does.
I know.
And so, I mean...
But back to our list.
Yeah, back to our list.
The list that you named, I would say Braveheart definitely did make an impact on popular culture. That is a movie, especially among men of a certain age. If you drop a Braveheart reference, people will get it.
Yes, I think Braveheart, if we were voting in into the Hall of Fame and saying if we went to a 20-year system, I think Braveheart would be first
Yes.
ballot Hall of Fame.
Yes, I would say so.
Yes.
Apollo 13, it's a typical Ron Howard film. It's nice, but I mean it's not like something that you know really need to. Because I like Ron Howard. He's a very good director, but it's not like I don't think his movies are like, you know, they don't blow me away.
I don't think that would make my Hall of Fame. If
It probably, you know, it's okay. Let me put it to you this way, it's kind of like Steve Garvey. Steve Garvey was a great baseball player, but would you consider him a Hall of Famer offhand?
No, I don't think I would do that. I mean, and I would probably try to figure out who it would be in hockey terms, but.
We're really going off the.
I think Apollo 13 would be like the Tony Amani.
Okay, I can see that. Yes, if you are any type of hockey fan or know about the Blackhawks or the New York Rangers, you'll get the
or the Calgary Flames.
I hope you get the Tony Amani reference.
Yeah, me too. If not, we just lost a couple more listeners here.
Well, look him up. Do some research of your own, people. You know, learn something.
The next film on the list would be Babe, the animated film. Somewhat
I
animated.
think had a very, you know, I remember the talking pig and everybody got kind of excited about it. That's kind of a movie I haven't seen that movie or thought about that movie in years. I bet if you looked at it now, you kind of just, once you get past the gimmick of the talking pig, I don't think that really had much of a shelf life, to be honest with you.
So the answer from you would be no. That would
No.
not make it. I don't think it would make it for me either. Il Postino.
I've never seen that movie.
I saw it. I believe a couple years after that when it came out, and it was good, but Hall of Fame worthy. The Academy sometimes gets hung up on that one film,
that one foreign film, and they want to show that they're real intellectuals
and they want to be diverse, so they
Yeah.
and then they will want to add five more films to the Best Picture category. My vote would be no for that film. Sense and Sensibility, I think.
It's not like I sit around watching Jane Austen movies. I'm a pathetic single guy, so.
I don't blame anybody for.
I honestly can't judge that because I think there's probably people who would be able to judge it far better than I would.
I think also, yeah. I mean, if you're
because the Jane Austen movies always get mixed up because there's Pride and Prejudice, there's Sense and Sensibility, and isn't Emma Thompson in like every single Jane Austen movie ever made?
I think so too, and for somebody like myself who isn't a Jane Austen fan,
they all kind of it's all like women in the 1820s England, and they're trying to find suitors, and Colin Firth shows up and he unbuttons his shirt and they all go crazy, and that's your average Jane Austen movie.
I wasn't awake that much in British literature class back in high school, and I apologize for people that are into Brit Lit. I'm not. If you are, then turn off this podcast now.
My idea of British literature is Sir Arthur Conan Doyle, so and Mary Shelley, so.
And Top Gear for me on the BBC is my idea of British literature.
But when I think of classic British entertainment, I think of Hammer Films. So, and you know what? If you look at some of those Hammer films, you would probably think they were Jane Austen movies.
I would much rather watch Hammer Films than.
It's funny because Hammer Films, when these films came out in the 50s and the 60s, they were considered like the way people look at torture porn today. I mean, people are like, oh, this is horrible, this is disgusting. You watch a Hammer film nowadays, it is literally like watching like masterpiece theater. I mean, everybody's wearing the Victorian suits. You've got, Peter Cushing and Christopher Lee, who were trained in, Shakespearean acting ability. I could talk about Hammer all day long. And surprisingly, when I re-listened to the first podcast, I did not mention Peter Cushing once, which absolutely amazes me that I did not do that.
You didn't, did you?
No, I did not mention Peter Cushing once. I don't think you mentioned the Coen brothers once.
I did not. I mean, the Coen brothers are getting quite a bit of flack critically right now for their newest film.
So you want to bring up the political correctness thing?
What do you want to talk about?
Well, some of that flack is, well, the Coen brothers, they don't use African Americans, they only use white people, and they had that little interview where they said, creating a film, writing a script, you can't think of things that way where I'm going to have an African American here, I'm going to have a lesbian here, I'm going to have an Asian here, and I have to agree to that to a certain point. I know this is going to put off some people. I don't think creativity is necessarily politically correct. I think when you think of a story, and I'll give an example, and I'm not saying this to toot my own horn. I wrote something for Josh Kennedy, and when I started writing it, there wasn't a main female character. And then I asked him about that because he has female characters in his films, and I thought there was something missing because there wasn't a female character there. So I actually rewrote it. I put in a female character. And even though this is kind of a genre film, she's not a scream. She doesn't stand around and scream. She's not, bubble-headed. She's an intelligent character. She has her own opinions, and she has a very distinctive personality. But I didn't do that to be politically correct. I didn't want, it wasn't so Rachel Maddow could pat me on the back. I just did it because I felt it worked best for the story. So that's just my own, way of looking at it. Creativity. I think the character and the story are more important than just trying to be politically correct. And people make fun of, people get on the Coen brothers, people get on Woody Allen all the time. And Woody Allen is about as far left as you can get. So I think when people complain about Woody Allen being racist, that's just totally ridiculous. I mean, he's a white Jewish guy from New York, and I mean, to ask Woody Allen to, start doing Straight Outta Compton, that's just ridiculous.
I'd like to see that.
Yeah.
But no, I mean, on a serious note, because we've Jason Halls and I have made movies together, short films, and we ended up making a film called The Drone that ended up screening at Cannes Short Film Corner a few years back. And one of the protagonists of the film is African American, and we didn't go into it going, this character needs to be African American. We chose the best actor that fit that, and he was a very good actor, and we got written about in a couple of blogs about, positively, of course, about diversity in film and how it was nice to see. Because the character that we cast that was African American was a doctor, and he was helping people in the film. And
he wasn't, Kevin Hart or anything like that type of.
No, I mean, and it was a very. I mean, I'm not saying that Kevin Hart isn't positive. It's just it was a very positive role, and that we cast. His name was Jonathan Kitt, and he's a very good actor. He's been in some national commercials, and It was a good fit for what we had, and at no time did we think about, we've got to cast this guy or we've got to cast this person because we want to look good in front of this group of people that might be judging us at this film festival, and we just cast who we felt was the best fit for that role. And again, I think when you do stuff like that, and you can do that, and it can be much, much more natural. And again, I mean, we're not here casting people to upset other people or piss them off or go, okay, we want to appease a certain
special interest group.
Yeah, and we're not trying to do that. We're just because again, when we started kind of getting that praise, we went, oh, okay, that's kind of cool. I mean,
But that wasn't what you were going after. It was
no,
just,
not at all.
You're just trying to get the best actor for the
the
right character for the fit the story, and that's what creativity is about. And I think when you and I have seen instances in certain TV shows and movies. I'm not going to name names because I don't want to label anything, but where you can tell they are trying to be maybe politically correct, and it looks too obvious. It just kind of it just doesn't look right.
Yeah, I mean, and I'm all for casting whoever you want to cast, and if it fits it, that's fine. I think something that's going to be of topic of discussion whether people like it or not, it will be the role of Roland in the new Gunslinger, the Stephen King Dark Tower series. Because, and again, and it's not because people, Roland needs to be this person or not. There are certain things that happen within the storyline that are very imperative.
Well,
That, and it's going to be interesting to see that dynamic happen between the characters.
The thing about the Dark Tower for me personally is I read like the first book and I just didn't get into it, so I never read the rest of them.
I love the first couple
for a while
books.
there. And once again, I'm going off point, but for a while there, I was reading everything Stephen King wrote, and his later books, the ones that got to 800 pages and where he just ended it because I think he just got tired. I just kind of lost interest in the whole Stephen King. But yeah, I tried getting in the Dark Tower, and I didn't really. I can't even remember reading the first book. I know I read the first book. I didn't read the others, so I'm sorry for taking you off track there.
No, I think I read the first 3.5 books, and then somebody spoiled the rest of the series for me, and then I kind of was happy that I stopped reading it. But I like the first 3 books quite a bit, and I like the storyline. And again, cast whoever you want. I mean, if the acting's great and you can do it, I don't care who you cast. I mean, it's just do what you got to do. I mean, it's just I don't want to start a huge flame war on the internet because because I don't care if you can cast Bernie Mac to play Roseanne Barr in a film and he pulls it off. Go for it.
That would be a major achievement considering the fact that he has passed away.
Yes.
So,
But we can achieve a lot through special effects, Dan, and you know what? I would love to see Bernie Mac as Roseanne Barr. So make this happen.
That's your next project.
And
Paul,
I hope he wins the Academy Award because to me, I think there needs to be a new campaign.
And Leonardo DiCaprio will hand the CGI Bernie Mac his Academy Award.
But
while fighting a bear.
But Tupac will stop it in the spirit of Kanye and not allow everything to happen. Okay. And then we'll
okay. Well, back to our
digitally get shot by a.
Back to our list, which we seem to have been working on for the past 90 minutes here.
Yes.
You've got a couple movies listed on here that were not nominated. The Usual Suspects, Rob Roy, 12 Monkeys, Heat, Casino, Seven, Toy Story. Now, I would say that in that list, most of those movies have had far more of a cultural impact than anything other than perhaps Braveheart. Toy Story, definitely. I mean, Toy Story almost really started an entire genre of film when you think about it.
Yeah, Toy Story to me would be definitely Hall of Fame worthy.
And Casino, I think, is Martin Scorsese's best film. And some people might say, oh, but no, seriously, I think Casino is probably the best film of the 1990s. I'll even go so far as to say that.
So Dan says that Casino should be in the Hall of Fame.
Yes, definitely Casino.
I could say yes to that. I don't think it's
Toy
Scorsese's
Story.
best.
I would go for Toy Story.
But going to the top of that list with Usual Suspects, I say yes. I say that should be. Not a Bryan Singer fan at all. There are reasons because of that.
Paul and I have discussed on our own.
Yes, but Usual Suspects, yes, should be in the Hall of Fame. I think Rob Roy is a very good film.
I think the problem with Rob Roy, it came out the same year as Braveheart, and there's a lot of similarities. The whole, Scottish guy fighting the, evil British guy, and I think Rob Roy, because Braveheart was so overpowering, I think it kind of. No, Rob Roy is a very good film, but what once again it's more of a Steve Garvey type of film than say I can't even finish my thought. A Steve Garvey type of film instead of a Ricky Henderson type of film. There we go.
So Dan's vote is no on Rob Roy. I'm going to agree with Dan and say that Rob Roy should not be in the Hall of Fame. 12 Monkeys. A resounding yes from me.
Now, see, you're a way bigger Terry Gilliam fan than I am,
Yes.
and I'm a Monty Python fan. But there's something, his feature films, they're very good. They're very well made. They're very interesting. But for some reason, I just can't get into them. I don't know why that is. I just
Not 12 Monkeys, huh?
no.
I think it's a very, very good remake.
Of that French film.
Yes.
Which I cannot. I don't even want to. Well, one thing, if we're going to continue these podcasts, I know a lot of foreign films, but if you actually want me to speak them or pronounce their names or the names of the actors or actresses,
I feel bad that I'm not referencing that film right now.
Yeah,
And
I'll attempt to do so, but I don't really want to because I'm going to make a toll. I mean, there's American and British actors whose names I can barely pronounce. So
yeah,
but anyway,
we'll,
I know what you're talking about with the remake of that thing. So
the remake of that thing, not the thing, but
that thing.
but the next film on that list would be Heat, and
Oh, definitely, I would put that in the Hall of Fame. And once again, that is another example of how you can't judge a movie, or you really shouldn't judge a movie like 3 months after its release. I mean, that is definitely a film that, and you probably know this too. The reviews for that film were not very good when it came out.
no,
There were a couple people that picked up on it, but I remember, the big thing about that film was it's De Niro and Pacino. And this is the first, obviously Godfather 2, they were technically in the film, but they weren't acting opposite one another. And De Niro and Pacino, of course, have that, the famous scene. And when Heat came out, I know a lot of people thought it was overlong. I think a lot of people just thought, oh, it's just another crime movie. It's, just Michael Mann doing his, and I have to admit, when I first saw Heat, I liked it, but I didn't really get into it. That's another movie where, and we can start an entire conversation on this. There are certain movies, the more you see them, the more you appreciate them.
Oh yeah, I was like that when I saw The Big Lebowski. When I first saw The Big Lebowski, I just went, huh, okay, and that was it. And it took about the third or fourth viewing where I was laughing out loud.
And I think Heat is definitely a film where I think as time has gone on, there are people, I think you told me this, who say it's considered one of the greatest films of the last 30 years. There are people that put it up in that level. I wouldn't say it was one of the greatest films of all, of the last 30 years, but I think it's definitely Hall of Fame material, I would say.
I think it's up there. I think for me, it's one of the best films of the 1990s. It maybe in my top 10.
Who was the cinematographer on Heat?
I knew you were going to ask me that question. I knew you were going to ask me that, and I'm going to look it up right now because that's what I do.
Yes, we have computer access this time. Last time we were just like, who?
But we are going to look at Michael Mann, of course, directed.
Did he write that as well?
I believe he may have written that as well. Yes, he did, because it was based on a lot of figures from, I thought, Chicago crime syndicates. And what he did...
You mean like Crime Story?
More or less, it was him writing Dante Spinati.
Okay, yeah, Dante Spinati. He did, I believe he did Dick Tracy, did he not? And Apocalypse Now?
I believe Dick Tracy was in the early 90s. So, looking at cinematography here for his resume here.
Oh, he did Last of the Mohicans, okay.
Yes, that would make sense since Michael Mann directed that too.
I don't think
going
he did
back into his
Apocalypse
resume
Now.
here. No, he didn't do Apocalypse Now.
Why am I? You know what? I think it's another.
He did Hudson Hawk, and I know all of us are big fans of Hudson Hawk.
Okay, I do have to go off target on this one. Turner Classic Movies has a blog, their own blog and their own website called Movie Morlocks, and they actually talked about one of my blogs, which just actually just shocked the heck out of me.
Nice.
And the lady, I cannot remember her name. I apologize for this. The lady said that, actually Will McKinley, I have to mention his name again. I mentioned it twice, so he owes me. Will McKinley reposted my blog about the 5 worst movies I have seen in the theater. And one of those 5 movies was Hudson Hawk. I took my brother Robert This is when Robert was a little shaver. Robert's a big Bruce Willis fan. Actually, Robert and I would watch Moonlighting together, so there's male bonding for you. Actually, I watched it to watch Sybil Shepherd, but, Anyway, so I went and took him to see Hudson Hawk at the Scottsdale Theater, which no longer exists. The entire Scottsdale Mall no longer exists.
No, it is gone.
And Robert's like maybe 9, 10, 11, 12 years old. So obviously I just can't leave the theater. But believe me, I wanted to leave the theater. Hudson Hawk is freaking horrible. It's terrible. It's just like a mound of... It sucks. So
what made your list?
That's who the dude I am thinking. Vittorio Storaro.
Yes, he did Dick Tracy in
Okay,
Apocalypse Now.
Yes, okay. See, these Italian guys, all
They're-
Sergio Leone, Mario Bava, it's all the same.
Yeah, it's so that's there you go for
Sylvester Stallone,
So what were your 5
Chico Marx.
What were your 5 worst films?
Hudson Hawk,
Okay, I can see that.
Batman and Robin,
Oh
The
gosh.
Avengers, the one on the British TV show with Ray Fiennes and my dear beloved Uma. And
That's pretty brutal.
how many did I name?
1, 2, 3.
Blair Witch Project,
Wouldn't be for me. I liked Blair Witch
and
Project.
I can't remember the 5th one.
I can tell you what is the worst film I probably have ever seen. It would be Cool World. With Gabriel Byrne.
that was like Roger Rabbit, but was that after Roger Rabbit, or
It was after.
kind of like?
It was after Roger Rabbit. I think it came out in 1992 or 93.
Yeah, I think that's early '90s.
1992. It was Kim Basinger was in it, and I saw it in the theater, and it's Ralph Bakshi, and
Yeah.
it's a very brutal cut of what he intended that film to be, and Brad Pitt's in it, and it's horrible. It makes zero sense because again it's almost like they took an assembly of the film,
And
not
just,
even a
like,
cut of the
Threw
film,
it together, and
and I think they just had this mishmash and was like, okay, we need to make some sort of money. Some guy named Paul is going to go see this in the theater with a date and make this girl never go on a date with him again because he's dragging her to these really messed up, because that was the thing you could do in the 90s is you could go take dates to these kind of movies that were being shown. Cool World was one of them, and I always somehow took dates to some of the worst possible. I took a date to the film Chaplin. Okay.
was she underage?
Yeah.
There's an old movie in joke for you, boys and girls.
I think she was underage because I was underage. So I mean that makes sense there, because I think Chaplin came out in 1992 and
Was Chaplin a great genius? Yes. Did he go for a certain type of female? Yes, he did.
Yes, he did. Yes, he did. And I will tell you something. Don't make date night the Robert Downey Jr. Chaplin night. I guarantee you she's not going to call you back. And not only did I mess up doing that, I took another date to go see the movie Alive. How can one person strike out that many times? I could do it now if I was a batter in the baseball now, because I could bat 225 and hit a home run every so often. But I struck out that night too by taking a date to go see the film Alive.
And that was swinging.
Yes.
That was like
I was striking out
That was
swinging.
like way off of the plate. You even if you choked up, you wouldn't have gotten the barrel of the bat around.
I was a very, very sad person in high school because I liked to go see movies that other people didn't want to see. And it wasn't just because I wanted to stand out and be that weird. I was weird. But I wanted to see these films. I wanted to see Reservoir Dogs. Nobody wanted to see that film with me. And
Did
so
that film even play in South Bend?
I believe it played for a week in South Bend.
Really? I don't even remember that playing in South. I mean, I didn't really know about Tarantino until Pulp Fiction.
But I had to wait
You
for the
were
film.
one up on me.
I had to wait for the. Yeah, I mean, I remember when it came out in video. I rented it the first day it came out in video because I waited it to come out, and I took it home, and we would have family days of watching movies, and it was my turn to rent, and that was the worst possible I made a huge mistake by renting Reservoir Dogs to show it to my predominantly religious family, who, number one, cuss words were not a big thing, especially for my cousins. My dad was a big, or is still, he's a big film buff, and I have to credit him for some of the films that he would bring home from the video store. Like, I mean, he brought home Henry Portrait of a Serial Killer, and
Wow.
yeah, and I watched that with my dad in high school, and I mean, he would be bringing home films that
I don't feel so bad taking my little brother Robert to Hudson Hawk.
no, you shouldn't. But my dad also, in the late '80s, brought home a copy of Ron by Kurosawa, and here I am in 8th grade watching Kurosawa. I mean,
Yeah.
I mean, yes, my dad would bring home some bombs once in a while,
Yeah.
like Doll Man,
Well,
because he had a full moon pictures
well,
obsession.
my parents had no real. I mean, like I said, my dad is like almost 70, and he makes fun of me for making old movies. And it's like, well, guess what, Dad? That's what you watch. But anyway, they had no real. They thought I was nuts to sit around and watch black and white movies, and they still think I'm nuts.
Nah,
But they would. Right down the road from us, not too far down the road, on the corner of Edison and Mayflower, used to be a Curtis Mathis, and that's where we would rent videos from. My mom and dad had the bad habit of renting anything that was new. It didn't matter what it was, or I remember they brought home The Unbearable Lightness of Being, and I kind of looked at him like, I don't think you guys are gonna like this. What do you mean? It's a new movie. That's how they were. Anything that was new, they would rent. And I would try to explain to them, and of course, I'm just a dumb teenager. I don't know anything. You just watch all those stupid old monster movies. You don't know anything about movies. Or if it was R-rated, because my mom and dad assumed if it was R-rated, there's got to be some nudity or some sex scenes or some stuff in it, and they would bring home things that I just knew. And that they would actually have no interest in whatsoever, and I'd be at Curtis Mathis with them. It's like, I'm going to rent this, Dad. You should rent. Oh, shut up! What do you know? It's like, you just wasted your money, Dad. You basically wasted your money getting a movie that you have absolutely no interest in whatsoever. That's the way I would, that was my experience with renting stuff.
We fortunately lived down the street from Portage Video when it was
yes,
open.
Portage Video.
And I went down there quite a bit on my bike, and my mom. See, the thing with my parents, or at least my dad, was he would just grab everything off the shelves and just rent everything.
Yeah.
And the great thing about Portage Video is that they would bring in some more of the independent films, and so we had the ability to kind of like see.
Yeah, Curtis Mathis had some interesting choices there.
That, you're bringing back some memories there with Curtis Mathis.
Yeah, and once again, and this is something that millennials have never experienced, looking at the video box and trying to judge a film from the video box, which my mom and dad did all the time, which I tried to tell them, no, you really shouldn't do that, because video boxes are, back in the old days that they would put video boxes together that literally had nothing to do whatsoever with the film. Absolutely nothing. It was like, how the comic book covers never coincide with what's inside the comic book. It's just to get your attention. That's the way it was with these video boxes. And my mom and dad would bring us home. They'd say, oh, look at this. See what it says in this video box? And it's like, you do realize that this film is like absolutely nothing whatsoever like the video box. But,
I gotta agree with you there. There were many films that my dad picked and I picked two, because you'd look at a film, especially in the 90s, when we were talking about these mid-budget films, you would look at a film and be like, okay, well, maybe this might be, but again, you'd get a winner once in a while with a film like King of New York, and you'd be able to, or another film that came out 1990, State of Grace, with Gary Oldman and Sean Penn and his future wife, Robin Wright Penn. I think this is one of my favorite films in the 90s. It's a very well-made film. And again, now, I don't think it would ever see the light of day. So.
Yeah, unfortunately, you're correct. Or it would be like direct to video, or it would be streaming, or you know.
Oh yeah, it's just one of those things that you're just not really going to see too much anymore. So.
Speaking of independent film, the last film I did see in a theater, I saw it last week, was The Witch,
Ah.
which is a very interesting film, very spooky, very creepy. Um, if you do go see The Witch, one thing I do have to warn you about is all the characters speak in a very thick 17th century colonial dialect, which is somewhat very hard to understand. I kind of wish the film had subtitles. I mean, it is very authentic to the period. If you want like slasher torture porn, that's not what you're going to get. It's
That's
a very
good,
it's a very slow film. It's a very atmospheric film. I cannot. If you mind looking up the writer director, I think
will.
his name is Robert Haggis, but I'm not sure. I want to get the gentleman's name right, although I'm sure he will never have any connection with us whatsoever. Robert Eggers.
Yes.
Robert Eggers is the writer-director of this film. It's set in 17th century colonial New England, and it is worth seeing.
I need to see that.
Yes, I would definitely recommend it. The one problem I did have with it, and I know we're going way off topic again, I've always wanted to ask you about this since you are a cinematographer. The film has one of those desaturated color schemes.
Yes.
Which everything looks tan or white or everything kind of looks bleached out. I can understand why certain films do that atmospherically, but it's getting to the point now where almost every film does that now, and it kind of annoys me because I think you can use, especially in a horror film, you can use color in certain ways, and you don't have to desaturate it. Terrence Fisher and Mario Bava certainly used color, very vibrant color, in classic horror films, and I just want to know how you feel about the whole desaturated color scheme.
I think that I'm fine with it. I think that cinematography is such a subjective thing, especially for the people filming it to the people viewing it, especially to create an atmosphere that is acceptable for the director. Because again, when you're filming a project, you know you're doing it for yourself, but also for the people involved in the film, whether it be the director. Of course, you're filming it for the director, but then you've got to realize you've got the director's vision. You have the idea of how you think the director is wanting your film to look, and then the third party that gets involved, which is the editor, that takes that, and there's so many other. I mean, the way that it's lit, the way that, because now, back in the day, you'd buy a certain type of film if you wanted a certain kind of color. If you bought Fujifilm to get your greens to be more green. Now, because the advent of digital film and the process of filming film, let's say raw, which in terms means there's a way of filming that allows a colorist to come in and grade a film a certain type of way, and there's so many different grades to a film. If you want to oversaturate your colors, if you want to make it very contrasty, or in what you say for The Witch, which you've got a lot of muted colors, which kind of was the color scheme for like the last Bond film.
Yeah,
that a lot of people
exactly.
say.
Spectre, yeah.
That the cinematographers will take that muted look, and again, I think it's personal preference, and again, I think that it kind of goes in cycles. I think that some people like to oversaturate. I tend to oversaturate my cinematography. I really make a lot of the colors pop, and again, I've done the desaturation. I'm kind of doing that in my new documentary. Where I'm kind of filming everything in RAW, but I'm not really pushing the colors that much. I'm kind of creating a world that is more about the subject matter, and I again, it's one thing to focus on the beauty of the shot. I'd like to see the film to find out why they, more or less of how they do certain things. I'm kind of thumbing through stills right now, and again, there's a shot here where it kind of shows an interior of a barn, but you kind of see the outside of it as well too, and the sky is muted and everything is.
No, the cinematography is. I mean, the shot setups are excellent because it's not in your face editing. He lets the shot sit there for a while, which is something very few people do nowadays. Because everything's boom, 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 boom. You got to cut everything, boom, 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 boom right away. Everything's got to move really, really fast, and just the pictorial quality of just letting a shot exist on its own. Something Sergio Leone did all the time. I mean, I just love Sergio Leone. I just love the way his movies look, and the fact that it's not like, I mean, yes, there were certain scenes like in the gunfights in this is the Dollars trilogy. Yes, it was edited brilliantly, but there were other certain scenes where he just lets the camera. David Lean did that. I mean. And a lot of directors just don't seem to do that nowadays. It's just like everything is, we gotta boom, make everything as fast as possible. And
yeah, quick cutting is quite common with a lot of way that certain people do their films. And again, I do like the long shot. I do like sitting on a shot for a certain period of time to let performances happen.
Yeah.
Because I really think that that's something that, as a cinematographer, I like to see. And again, I understand why it works for certain action films. If I'm making Taken 3, I understand why.
Maybe for an action film, yeah. But I mean, even like I said, Sergio Leone films, you could technically define them as action films, but it wasn't. I mean, there were certain times where he used editing. He edited things very quickly, but a lot of times there's he didn't do that. I mean, he just let the shot go, and I you just don't really see that all that much anymore. The Assassin, which I bought on Blu-ray, is another film where I mean, I probably should have you watch that tonight if we don't fall asleep here pretty soon. But The Assassin is another film. It's a very slow-paced, very visual, almost a silent film. And just the camera setups and the cinematography is just breathtaking in that movie. But that does not have a muted color scheme.
Yeah, and I think that's interesting to take something like this, and because again, to go through that process, I mean, as a cinematographer, you do sit down, at least I do, with the director to talk about certain things like that, to give them options. And again, you can also take test shots and then put them through certain color grades to go, okay, do you want a certain thing to look like a bleach bypass, or do you want certain colors to come out in a color scheme? Let's, for example, let's take a film like The Crow that came out that more or less has 4 colors in the entire film. But it's a really interesting conversation to have. And again, I mean, if you understand that usage, and it would be interesting to see some of these stills color corrected in other ways to see how they would affect a viewer, how they view the film. And that would be really interesting to do, is to have a film and do a side-by-side comparison, to have different cuts.
Or almost like a director's cut and a theatrical cut. You could do a desaturated cut and a colorful cut, I guess is the best way you can do it.
And it would be very interesting to see the reaction from audiences, how they would perceive different cuts of that film, especially for color correction. And I don't know if anybody has really done that. And it would be a very interesting... It would be an interesting experiment to do for something like a short film.
Yeah.
And who knows? I may start talking to somebody about that and maybe create a 5-minute short that has a film in black and white, but very, let's say, saturated as far as, going all the way back to like Touch of Evil.
Yeah.
Or something that is shot in the form of, let's say, I'm actually blanking right now. The Terrence Malick film, Days of Heaven. Mm-hmm. Just different kinds of color schemes here, and let's say like The Witch, or something of a film that's very bold, like Across the Universe. Yeah. So I think you can really. I think that's an experiment that somebody should try and to see, and maybe that That would be interesting to do. A 5-minute short that is almost side by side in quadrants to figure out and screen it in 4 different theaters in front of 4 different audiences to see what the reactions are. I think that would be a very interesting experiment. So,
Make sure it stars Leonardo DiCaprio. So.
I hope so. Leo,
he's fighting a bear, and the bear's different color, and has a different color scheme.
well, I think one of the Bears should be from Chicago. The other Bear should be
UCLA.
Boston Bruin and UCLA
UCLA.
Bruin. And
Well, how much time are
we're at an hour and a half right now. We've been talking for a long time. I don't think anybody's listening anymore. Everybody's gone home.
do you want to cut it off or try
Yeah.
to get to sports movies or?
I think we might have to have sports movies wait for another episode, and who knows, we might have to do another episode soon here.
Okay.
So, anyway,
there's an ending for you.
yes, Spock dies at the end. I'm sorry to spoil that for you, but he's dead.
And Han Solo gets killed too. So.
Yes, but that's in the remake, so we don't know.
And Hudson Hawk gets killed as well.
Yes, twice, and he gets shot by Greedo and Han. So, so I think we're going to end episode 2 here on that note. I'm Paul Eisen.
I'm Dan Day Jr., the creator of the Hitless Wonder Movie blog. And if you're interested in any of my bizarre ramblings, please check the blog out. And Paul, any way they can check your work out?
Well, right now I'm currently working on a new documentary called We Love Lydia. There is a Facebook page currently. I'm getting a website started here pretty soon, but it is We Love Lydia. It's on Facebook. All you have to do is search for it. Give it a like, and that's currently what we're doing. There's also the website tenwingmedia.com where a lot of our projects sit, and you're welcome to check that out. There are certain projects that are for free on there, and you're welcome to see them. And, give some feedback to us. There's also Ten Wing Media on Facebook as well. And if you feel bold, you could always friend me on Facebook too. I'm Paul Eisen. Last name is Lyzun, just in case if you can't spell it correctly. A lot of people can't. Sometimes I can't. And Dan Day, he's also on Facebook as well if you want to friend him and start some interesting conversations with us. And, let's talk film. Let's talk all kinds of film. But right now I'm going to hit the stop button because I'm just rambling and it's late, and I think we're going to start watching some extra movies here. So till the next episode.
Thank you
Thank
for
you
listening.
so much.
I hope you were able to listen to this
Yeah,
point.
me too. So anyway, have a good night, good day, good morning. Whenever you decide to listen to this, we hope you listen. And see you later.